Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Pinellas County Small Lodgings Hurricane Preparedness Summit. My name is Jess McCracken. I'm the whole community specialist with Pinellas County Emergency Management, and I will be your moderator for this program. The goal of today's webinar is to help you as owners and property managers of lodging facilities here in Pinellas County start a disaster plan or share guidance on how to improve your existing plan to help you better prepare yourself, your business, and your guests for hurricane season. A few housekeeping items. I do need to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. Also, if you would please pull up your chat box and keep an eye on that, as we will be using the chat feature to share links from our panelists as the discussion goes through our program. And we do encourage your questions, which can be submitted via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We have a lot of information to cover and a lot of great panelists have joined us today, so I will jump right in and introduce our panelists. Joe Borries is a 23-year Pinellas County government employee, serving the last 8 years as the operations manager for the Department of Emergency Management. Joe developed his passion for emergency management over the course of his career, supporting emergency management on a variety of leading-edge projects, such as hurricane evacuation studies, hazard analysis, and application implementations. He has been a part of every Pinellas County EOC activation since Hurricane Charlie in 2004, and during activations of the Emergency Operations Center, Joe serves as the operations chief. Next, we have Brian Ellis. Brian serves as the disaster recovery coordinator for the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. Brian worked to support economic recovery efforts in Florida in the wake of Hurricane Irma, helping to coordinate the efforts of local governments, economic development organizations, and individual businesses. Brian helps to provide direct assistance to small businesses in navigating and accessing the numerous resources available from multiple agencies to aid in recovery and resilience activities. Next, we'd like to welcome Chief Clint Belk, who is the fire chief for Madeira Beach Fire Department. Chief Belk has 17 years experience in the field of fire and EMS, with 9 years of that service in Pinellas County. Chief Belk has served as a firefighter, rescue lieutenant, fire inspector, and currently serves as the fire chief with Madeira Beach Fire Department. Barry Scarr is the vice president of Centria Insurance, a full-service independent property and casualty insurance agency in Seminole, Florida, specializing in community association insurance since 1984. Barry is the past president of the Suncoast chapter of Community Associations Institute, holds the Community Insurance and Risk Management Specialist designation, and currently serves as the insurance chair for the CIA Florida Legislative Alliance. Lisa Foster is a certified floodplain manager and currently serves as the floodplain administrator for Pinellas County, managing Pinellas County's comprehensive floodplain management program and NFIP community rating system participation. She's also the vice chair of the Florida Floodplain Managers Association, past president of the Florida Local Environmental Resource Agencies, and sits on the Association of State Floodplain Managers Climate Change Task Force. She was awarded the National Award for Excellence in CRS by the FEMA Federal Insurance and Mitigation Administration in 2018 for her extensive work with the real estate industry and partnerships with communities across Florida. Katrina Hale is a local business owner of Sandglow Villas, and has operated Sandglow Villas for 21 years. She was a member of Superior Small Lodgings for 21 years, several of those years as an executive officer, at both at the state and local level. She is a current member of the FRLA Small Inns organization. In addition to hospitality, she is active in the community as a member of the Indian Shores Property Owners Association, Women's Club of Indian Shores, and Tampa Bay Beaches Chamber. And finally, we have Dave Connor, the Public Information Manager for Pinellas County. Dave Connor has served as the Public Information Manager for Pinellas County for 2 years, after supporting public relations and international law enforcement for the Coast Guard for a decade. He is a FEMA certified public information officer, a paddleboarder, and has hosted multiple properties on short-term rental sites. So as we move through the program, we'd like to learn a little bit more about you. So we'll be asking polling questions throughout our event. And we will share the information and the results from our polling questions so you get an idea of how everyone else is responding and what we're looking forward to. Getting the information that maybe we didn't know that we needed, but we absolutely need as we approach hurricane season. So let's get started with our first polling question. So our first polling question is, do you have a disaster plan? And if you would just select one here, either yes, I have one for my personal home, yes for my business, yes for both my personal home and my business, or no, I do not have a disaster plan. And remember, the goal of this webinar is to help you start to create that plan or update your current plan. So please do not feel that we will have any judgment if you do not have a plan. We're really just trying to gauge where you're at and what education we can provide to you. Okay, looking pretty good. All right, and I will stop the poll here and to share the results. So it looks like a good portion of us do have a plan for our personal homes, and about 35% of us have one for personal home and business. But we do have some that do not have a disaster plan, so you are definitely in the right place. And we will get started with our first speaker to talk about some of the issues that the small lodgings owners and property managers are experiencing. So I'd like to reintroduce Katrina Hale. Katrina, you've owned and managed Sand Glow Villas for over 20 years. What has your experience been with the guests of Pinellas County as it relates to hurricane season? And in your opinion, what are the concerns of the small lodging owners and property managers?
With the guests, you're going to find that you get a variety. You get the overreactors who are going to cancel even if there's a mention of a storm in the Gulf. And then you get the ones that completely take it for granted and want to stay and look at the big waves. So they miss how dangerous. I don't think they understand. Some of them don't understand the danger of a hurricane. What the business owners, I feel, we need to know where we can send our guests when there is an evacuation. I feel that's key to know the safest route for a guest. It's also a concern, and I've spoken to several of the small properties, is getting the information to the guest so that they don't overreact. I also feel that them understanding information on insurance, travel insurance, is handy.
Great.
It's just key to have a plan to get your guest out of here and to protect your property so there is something for you to go back to for a business.
Absolutely. And making sure that everybody really heeds those warnings and takes it seriously is a big part of that. So I would like to talk about some of the resources and information, but first I think it's important to talk about where we can get the resources and information. And I would like to introduce Dave Connor. Through all the stages of hurricanes, from preparedness to planning, to evacuating and riding out the storm, to knowing when to return home and where to get services, we need to know where to get our information. So Dave, what platforms does the county use to communicate to the public, and where can residents and guests go to find available resources and information?
Thanks, Jess. Hi, everybody. As she mentioned, I'm the public information manager. I'm also the lead public information officer, or one of them, during an emergency activation. So from about 5 days out, if we anticipate a storm coming to Pinellas County, me and my team will be at the Emergency Operations Center, making sure that we can share with Pinellas County residents and visitors information that is timely, accurate, and relevant. And all of those things are very important when there's a potential storm bearing down on us with the associated impacts. So I'll talk through some of the ways that we can get you information, and then also some of the ways that you can help your guests get information. And I'm also happy to answer any questions if you want to throw them in the Q&A at the bottom. Our overall goal is to try to get information to people where they regularly get their information. Not everybody gets their information in the same place. Some people read the paper, some people turn on the TV, some people go to the internet, some people talk to their neighbors. We also recognize that Pinellas County has some areas with limited technical access. We have a large number of non-English speakers, so we're targeting them as well. And really what that means for us is we're generally trying to talk on about 10 different directions at the same time. The most traditional way that public information officers communicate is through the media. We have daily media alerts that go directly to the news desks. Sometimes they're more than once a day if the situation is changing very quickly. We also have a media room at the Emergency Operations Center where members of the media can come and literally be 10 feet from our communications office. So we always recommend it. If you're not sure what's going on in a storm, turn on your local news channel. Turn on your local TV station. All the stations have great working relationships with us. They have very active and engaged reporters, and they want to get accurate information out. Same with our local news radio outlets like WFLA, WMNF. Stuff like that. And the Tampa Bay Times, the newspaper is only printed twice a week, but their website and as well as the Tampa Bay newspaper website are updated very regularly, and they also have much of the latest information. We also recognize that a lot of our county is online, so we use our Facebook page and our Twitter account, which Mary will be sharing the link to those just in case you're not already following us. Those are updated year-round with all sorts of useful information, but during a storm, we completely devote our social media streams to relevant storm information. We also use Nextdoor, if you're familiar with it. It's more of a neighborhood-based communications platform. Your guests probably won't be on it because usually people can only have their Nextdoor account associated with one address, and that'll be their home address, but it's a good way for you to stay in the loop. So those are kind of the ways that people can come to us and get information and look at information. But we also push information directly out to people. There are a couple ways we do that. The most common is Alert Pinellas. Alert Pinellas is an all hazards direct communications platform. It's used for storms. It's used for tornadoes. We used it in the early parts of the pandemic to help people understand where they could get a vaccine when that was still very challenging. You can sign up for it, and you can choose to get text messages or emails, and Mary will share the link with that as well. Your guests can sign up for it too, and then they can unsubscribe whenever they leave if they want to. In some situations, and this is just kind of a heads up, in some situations, we will use what are called wireless emergency alerts. And you're familiar with those if your phone has ever started making a bunch of noise and you got an Amber Alert. We reserve those communications for really the most severe things. If we're anticipating life-threatening storm surge in certain coastal areas, we can use that. And those are based on cell phone towers. It'll send a message to everyone whose cell phone is connected to a specific tower, and that way we can hit visitors as well as residents. Doesn't matter what your area code is. If you're by a tower, you'll get it. We can also use kind of a reverse 911 feature that calls all the landlines and the cell phones listed in the county with that 727 area code. We will work with our public works department to do kind of in-person signage. Those are either those variable message boards that you see on the side of the road. We'll use those a lot for, say, sandbag distribution sites to kind of mark the entrances and help people get to the right place. Also, you've seen those overhead signs when you're driving down some of the larger county roads. We'll use those to clue people in that a storm is coming and help them understand where to get information. And lastly, one of our communication tools is we work very closely with community partners. This may not apply as much to you, but partners in the deaf and hard of hearing community, the blind or low vision community, and a lot of our non-English speaking communities, we work with them to get our information out. We do put everything out in English and in Spanish because we have, I think, about 17% of our population speaks Spanish as their first language. So that's kind of what our work is on a day-to-day in the Public Information Office during an activation. There are a couple resources I also wanted to share with you. The first, you may have seen it before, it is the Hurricane Guide. It is a printed guide. It's a newspaper style, and it is comprehensive. We've completely revised it this year. If you have not seen a copy, you can get them at your local library. You can get them at most government buildings, or you can contact emergency management if you need additional copies. I recommend just leave one in your lodging, the same way you might leave a beaches tourism guide or just other information about the area, especially during hurricane season. It's a really good resource to have, and it's just something to kind of help your guests have that awareness. During emergencies, The county, as you know, activates our county information center. That is there's a phone number for that. It's 464-4333. And we'll put that in the chat. There's also a live chat option for folks who may not be able to use a telephone or who may need some additional help. So we'll share that link with you. Your guests can call that. You don't have to be a Pinellas County resident to use that service, and they also have the most up-to-date information about what shelters might be open, whether an evacuation is ordered, or other topical questions that people might have. The other resource that I'll share, and I don't think it's being addressed elsewhere here, is the Know Your Zone tool from Pinellas County. So the Know Your Zone tool is very straightforward. It's really just you type in your address and it'll tell you, well, if you typed in your address today, it would tell you if that address is in an evacuation zone. And what zone it's in. If there's a storm coming and an evacuation is ordered, then the Know Your Zone map changes. It'll tell you not only if what your zone would be, it will tell you what evacuation zones have been ordered to evacuate. So you're from that zone A and a zone A evacuation is ordered, it'll tell you this address is ordered to evacuate, and it'll tell you what shelters near that address have been opened to receive any folks who need shelter and don't have another place to go. So that tool, along with a couple others, are on a newer site we've stood up that I will share here. It's called storm.pinellascounty.org, and that is what we're turning that kind of into our live dynamic resource for anything that might come up during a storm. And lastly, because y'all are lodging operators, obviously there's some interaction with the CVB, not only for when a storm is targeting our area, but for when a storm is targeting other areas in Florida. If folks have to evacuate from the East Coast, then they may decide to come over to the West Coast and be looking for a place to go. That is all through that's managed through the CVB's partner program. It's partners.visitstpete.clearwater.com, or I'll share this link. Mary already shared it. It's the visitstpeteclearwater.com/storm. A lot of it is on there. So that is kind of the summary of how folks can help themselves and how we will be working to get information out. If you walk away with nothing else and you have guests who happen to be in town when our area is in a storm, the easiest thing you can do is tell them to turn on a TV and start taking in information that way. But as we've talked about, there are a number of other options depending on their preferences. And I'll end with that. And again, if you have any questions, you can type them in. I know there's a question and answer session at the end of this presentation, and I'll be available for that too.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Dave. That's a lot of information. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. It can be a little like drinking from a fire hose when we're plugging all this information and trying to get you all the resources and links and websites. We will be sending out a full resource guide, which will also have a link to this webinar video, as well as all the links that we discussed today, the ones that we are throwing in the chat. So really just try to take in the information and don't forget to submit your questions so we can get to those at the end of the program. Dave did mention the Alert Pinellas, the emergency notification system that we have to get information out to you. And I just would like to poll the audience to see how many of us actually are registered for the Alert Pinellas app. So if you would go ahead and just answer that again. Don't forget to submit your questions so we can get to those at the end. And all right, so I will end that and share the results. This looks great. It looks like 71% of us are registered for Alert Pinellas, and 18% of us that aren't plan to register. So that's fantastic to receive those emergency notifications from Pinellas County. So as we continue the discussion of preparedness and recovery, there's an important overarching principle that we're continuously building in the Tampa Bay region, and that's resiliency. So I'd like to bring Brian Ellis up to talk more about these efforts. Brian, what can we do to make our community more resilient, and what initiatives are already underway throughout the region and here in Pinellas?
Sure, thank you for the question. Resiliency is the ability to recover following a disaster. So how quickly a business can bounce back and get their doors open, but at the same time becoming better prepared for the future. So that's a concept that we want to implement anywhere we can. Communities can become more resilient by practicing good disaster planning techniques in advance of disaster. So building new or retrofitting old infrastructure for their businesses or small lodgings to a higher standard that would be better able to deal with disasters. Anywhere you can do that it's going to be important. Resiliency means backing up critical data for your business and information, and having alternative arrangements in place to continue business should you be faced with the unexpected. So where can you resume operations, a contingency operation base, at least have an idea of that. And there are a lot of resiliency initiatives taking place throughout Tampa Bay. Some focus on the private sector and small businesses, and some are on the government level. Green infrastructure is being implemented in a lot of places across the board, with some components of the infrastructure designed to absorb water to reduce impacts to flooding. There's transportation initiatives for our future transportation needs and infrastructure being built to look at kind of how we can prepare for the future with more disasters and greater impacts. So it's being looked at through that level as well, through that scope. Here at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, we've created a coalition to discuss and combat effects of climate change and focus on resiliency practices, which consists of local governments initially, but it's actually expanded to individual businesses, the private sector. So that's an initiative. The coalition is currently developing a regional resiliency action plan to coordinate regional hazard mitigations and an action plan for local governments to follow as a resource. So there's initiatives underway, kind of all levels from government all the way down to your individual business.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. That's a lot of great information. Barry, let's jump right into this. What are some insurance considerations for business owners before and after the storm?
First of all, I'd like to just, there's two kind of overriding issues here is about the types of insurance, but also I want our business owners to be prepared for we're kind of in a crisis right now in the property insurance world. We're seeing a lot of increases. We've been talking about flood. We got issues there too, and it's amazing. This is all culminating at the same time, but there are increases in property and general liability. So for your facility, be prepared. Have a conversation with your agent and understand that these issues are at us right now, and it's all wind related. It's not the Surfside collapse or anything like that. It's all wind, hurricane related, and we're losing carriers. We're losing capacity. Premiums are going up, and it's kind of one of the worst periods I've seen in most of my career. I've not seen it this bad. We've lost some big carriers. So just understand, get ahead of the curve, and talk to your agent. The primary coverages, of course, is the property coverage, and anything you can do to mitigate your premium in addition to losses is going to help you. One of the issues, and this is just happening, one of the issues the carriers are addressing right now is roofs. And if your building roof is more than 10 or 12 or 15 years old, you either will not get coverage or you're not going to get replacement coverage. So again, this roof issue, which the legislature addressed last year, and we didn't think was going to be an issue, is now becoming an issue. So be prepared, get ahead of that curve for your facility, so you don't run into an issue trying to get good quality coverage. So the property there is, like I said, the issue, get your hurricane deductibles up. I don't believe in prepaying for a claim that may never happen with low deductibles. So get the deductibles up and help reduce your premiums. The liability side, I'm seeing some issues in condo associations that are now becoming more like hotels because their rental ratio is so high. So those are having similar issues, and we're seeing the liability claims or the premiums go up. We're also seeing some interesting claims that we hadn't seen before, not only in slip and fall, but in some other areas of litigation. So again, the general liability policies and premiums are being challenged. It's a challenging time also. So do what you can safe-wise to mitigate your property from injuries. It's enough to have to pay the premium, but we definitely want to avoid a claim at all possible. The third area of coverage that I feel is pretty important is a business income. So that's an area where, if you're unable to stay open, you have the proper income replacement from your property policy that will help replace that revenue. So business income, that's a very important element to make sure you're having a discussion about when you're purchasing your insurance. If you're, and I'm sure most of these lodging areas in the hospitality industry are certainly near the beach. A lot of them, and you're going to be dealing with flood insurance, and we were discussing earlier the issues. That's another impact that we're just starting to realize with FEMA's new risk rating 2.0. Again, have this discussion early on with your agent. You make sure the agent or agency you're working with is well connected in the industry, so they can provide more options for you. And that's what you're looking for right now when we are in a little different. We're in a very hard market and coming out of a soft market for about 7 or 8 years. Now we're in a very hard market. So it changes the parameter we're dealing with. And now you got to look at things a little differently because, premium is going to impact your revenue. And it's just, it's a unique time right now. So, have those discussions early on with your agent.
And as owners and property managers, we're obviously responsible for not only ourselves and our buildings, but for our guests. Is there any special insurance considerations that Pinellas County guests should be aware of?
Well, certainly a lot of travelers and guests, can purchase beforehand traveler's insurance or travel insurance. So they can help mitigate their situation by having that kind of insurance. Have that discussion before you make your plans, of your travel plans, of what kind of protection you need, and also health insurance. So you've got travel insurance as far as your accommodations and your traveling and your airfare and things like that, and where you stay and what happens, but also make sure you have health insurance that is going to follow you wherever you're going, and make sure those things. The main thing is to have the discussion and understand what you have. Make sure you understand, well, here's what I have. How's it going to work? You need to have that discussion and plan, ahead of time.
Great. All great tips. Thanks so much, Barry.
You bet.
Let's bring Lisa Foster up to discuss flood insurance. Lisa, what do we need to know about flooding in Pinellas County, and what are the resources available to access this information?
Hi, thanks again, Emergency Management, for putting this great panel together. A lot of really important information being discussed here. And Barry has some really good points about understand, what is covered and what is not covered. And Brian mentioned earlier this Hurricane Phoenix, which is sort of this worst case scenario, 1,000-year storm event type of thing. But we really need to look at the different levels of impact that we might have. And everybody, of course, has a different perception of what that flood risk or hurricane risk might be. just a couple pictures here to kind of point out, one person might have that perception of risk that he's not going to get run over walking off the crosswalk, while somebody else thinks he's perfectly safe because he's on the crosswalk. But those different perceptions of risk and what level of risk each person is willing to take are going to vary. So this is a personal and business decision for all of you. As I walk you through some of the flood risk data that's available to you, I'm going to walk you through an example, and this is sort of a Hurricane Phoenix scenario, but not quite. This is a little motel. This is up in the Panhandle. Next slide, please. This is where it was. It was on the FEMA map in an X zone, which is classified as a low risk. And this is Mexico Beach. So we have an X zone on Mexico Beach, and then of course Michael happened, and that's where that property was. Next slide. So back to FEMA says this is a low risk area. That means it is outside of that 500-year storm event. But of course, Michael was a much larger event. But there's other data out there other than that FEMA data. So don't feel like that FEMA data is the end all be all for your risk. Or that level of risk that you're going to see. Next slide, please. So this is the storm surge data for Bay County. And you can see that the storm surge inundation for that same exact spot is somewhere in a 2 or 3. Definitely going to be very wet with a Category 3 hurricane. So anything Category 3 and up will flood that property, but FEMA considers it low risk based on the probability of that occurring. Well, Michael was, a Cat 4 to 5? I think it got upgraded to a 5 after they reevaluated the data. So that's a very big storm. So we're talking much larger than a 500-year storm event. But we build and we plan and we buy insurance for this 100-year storm event. But the bottom line is there are different size storm events. Here in Pinellas County, we had Tropical Storm Ada. That was less than a 25-year event, and it caused a lot of damage. And then back to Barry's point about understanding what's covered. A lot of those folks that were flooded out from Tropical Storm Ada last fall didn't know that their flood insurance didn't cover loss of use. So now they were in hotels or apartments or wherever they were staying, paying rent and paying their mortgage for the amount of time that it took to repair their home. So it's really important that you understand what is covered. You talk to your agent. The flood insurance has 2 different sides. There's structure coverage, and then there's contents coverage. So the renters can get just that contents coverage. And then, if you're thinking hurricane and you're thinking larger event, and you want to be prepared for the big one, then you might want to buy excess coverage because there are caps on how much coverage you can get under the NFIP policies. So there are different things that you need to talk to your insurance agents about. And you also need to take a look at the different size events. So let's go to the next slide and talk about some of the data. So the flood insurance rate map, of course, this is one source of data. This is available across the country. You can go to floodmaps.pinellascounty.org to find this data, or you can go to the FEMA website directly. This is just a random location I picked down in St. Pete Beach. We see here that the 100-year flood elevation, that's 1% annual chance. So every single year, there's a 1% chance this storm could happen according to the FEMA modeling, is a 9-foot BFE. Now the ground out here is probably about 5 feet. So that's about 4 feet deep. So they're saying every single year, there's a 1% chance that a flood that's 4 feet deep might happen. So that's the flood insurance rate map from FEMA. That's FEMA's data. Next slide. Pinellas County just finished a vulnerability assessment. So this is a sea level rise and storm surge vulnerability assessment. So we have data that looks at future conditions just from your high tides and king tides. And then we also took that data and applied it with storm surge for future conditions. Well, the baseline was the current condition. So our 100-year floodplain in the same spot is actually a base flood elevation of 13 feet. So if the ground is 5, that's about 8 feet deep. So the county study says every single year there's a 1% chance that there's going to be a flood that's 8 feet deep in this spot. Next slide. And then we have the storm surge data as well. And this is all available on floodmaps.pinellascounty.org. So like we saw with the Panhandle, and we looked at that example, we saw that FEMA says this is a low risk area. And the storm surge model shows that this is subject to flooding from a Category 3 hurricane. Well, you can look at these Category 1 storm here, and we see that the depth is 5 feet. So that's kind of like that 1% annual chance that FEMA said, right? They said base flood of 9, the ground is 5, so about 4 feet deep with that 1% annual chance according to FEMA. Well, worst case scenario, Cat 1 storm surge is 5 feet deep. So FEMA is saying, okay, we're going to plan for a Cat 1. Now the next slide, please. Now a Cat 2 storm surge, the depth goes up to 8 feet. So the Pinellas County study says, well, that 100-year floodplain, that 1% annual chance storm really is more like a Cat 2 storm, worst case scenario, Cat 2 storm. So once you start looking at all these maps and all the different data available, you can start assessing what that risk for your property is. And if you want to get a flood information map report, you can get that from us here at Floodplain Management at the county. And we're happy to fill one out for you or talk to you about your flood risk. But you need to look at these different scenarios, like a tropical storm Eta. What's it? Put a foot of water in your house. As long as it's below the power, you know, it might not be too expensive to repair. But once that flooding gets up above the power, it gets much more expensive. And of course, you can't expect that disaster assistance to just show up. That's why the insurance and being able to get back up on your feet after an event is so important. Next slide. This is the floodmaps.pinellascounty.org. You'll go into this site and you'll see all the little cards for all the different flood risks, and you can just click around on there. The county floodplains button will show you the vulnerability assessment floodplains that I just showed you. The storm surge button there will bring you back to that storm surge inundation map that I showed you. And if you go to the Know Your Zone, you'll find the FEMA maps. And there's another one on here for all the data if you want to turn layers on and off. So I encourage you to find out what your flood risk is, talk to your insurance agents, make sure that you have your plan in place to recover from different levels of flooding and hurricanes, whether it's that 1,000-year Cat 5, or if it's that less than 25-year smaller storm like Tropical Storm Eta. Just make sure you're able to get back up on your feet after these flood events. So you need to understand what that risk is. And back to you, Jess.
Great. Thanks so much, Lisa. Looking at insurance as a preparation technique is very important. Having your policy set up, obviously, in advance to protect your assets will make all the difference when it comes time for recovery. We can't stop the storm from coming, and we can minimize some of the damage to our home, but we can protect ourselves by setting up our insurance policy, having those conversations during blue skies to make sure that we're able to be made whole again after we sustain that loss. Another tip is to do some research and pre-contract with a licensed general contractor or a licensed restoration company. Make sure they're licensed, bonded, and insured. A lot of these companies have pre-registration programs where you will become a preferred customer. They come out, they do assessments of your property. So you're first on the list to get somebody out there to help you mitigate against further losses and get those repairs underway after a storm. You don't want to be one in the whole lineup of everybody that needs a new roof. You want to have already had that conversation, vetted the company that you feel comfortable working with, because it's very stressful when it comes time to get those claims filed and get the repair work underway.
And Jess, we just had that experience with Eta last November. That was a big flood storm, by the way, not a lot of wind, which was very interesting, especially to the beach, some of the beaches. But those homes and businesses that had that pre-relationship with a restoration company literally got started receiving service within 24 hours. So that's a huge point.
Absolutely. And a lot of those companies, most of those companies are very familiar working with insurance carriers. So they know the lingo, they know how to advocate for your side of the story and help with the claims process. It can be very overwhelming. So I definitely recommend looking into that. Thanks so much, Barry and Lisa, for giving us the insurance information for this year. I want to introduce Chief Belk to talk about the role of the county and emergency responders. So before we get into how businesses can plan and assist their guests in preparing for hurricane season, I think it's helpful to learn about what the county and emergency responders are doing before and after the storm. So Chief, what do residents of Pinellas County visitors need to know about the county's response before, during, and after a storm?
All right. Thanks, Jess. I'm happy to be here and assist with this. So the first responders are before the storm. It's not a whole lot that we're doing at that point. It's essentially getting the message out and just hurry up and wait for the storm to get here. We'll continue to respond to calls for service, whether it's medical related, fire related, what have you. But there's going to come a point where risk versus benefit doesn't hold up for us at that point. So we actually have it in our SOPs where once you get to 50 to 75-mile-an-hour winds, we make that decision, go or no go. I make that call for my department, whether I should send them or not. So a Category 1 hurricane, it starts at 74, 75 miles per hour. And once we hit 75 miles per hour with sustained winds, we don't respond at all. So if there is an evacuation order, you should heed that warning and you should evacuate, because if something does happen during just a Category 1 hurricane, we're not going to respond to that call until until the wind speeds slow down at a sustained level as well. So if there's an evacuation order, we encourage everybody to take part in that and listen to those warnings. As far as access passes, so for Airbnbs and hotels, that's going to be a little tricky because we issue 2 access passes per address, and so some Airbnb owners or hotels, if they might leave one, but they'll need one for themselves to be able to evacuate or get back onto the barrier islands. So if you are here vacationing and there is an evacuation order, we highly recommend that you just take everything with you and vacate the island.
Great. Thanks so much, Chief.
Absolutely.
We're going to jump right into what every resident, visitor, and business owner needs to know from Pinellas County Emergency Management. For this part of the discussion, I'd like to bring back Joe Voorhees. Welcome, Joe. What are the key messages for residents and visitors of Pinellas County to stay safe during hurricane season?
Good morning, everybody. Joe Voorhees from Emergency Management. Talked to you this morning. Glad everybody's able to attend. Several things we ask, is know your risk, have a plan, and stay informed. So know your risk and be able to assess those risks are some of the things that you do already. So power outages, when the power outage goes out, your pool pump goes out, your lights go out, your guests' AC units go out, and they may become concerned with that, right? Fire suppression, you're working with your local fire district on that as well too. What happens when you have that happen? So those things that are common to it's the same thing we ask for storm surge. Is understanding if you're in an evacuation zone, what that zone is. What is anticipated storm surge. You can see there, as Lisa pointed out, our storm surge application will show you how deep the water can get where your location is. If you're on the barrier islands, you're all an AVAC and you're susceptible to all levels. If you're an AVAC, you're susceptible to all levels of storm surge. Okay. So, and evacuation levels from A, B, C, D, and E. High winds as well too, knowing your risk for that, having a plan for that, assessing those, as with your canopies and things like that you may have out there, umbrellas, that risk for just those low winds. So what are the higher wind risks, right? Your flooding risk that Lisa touched on, understanding that as well too. And again, for those on the barrier islands, water spouts become tornadoes as soon as they come on the land. So, understanding your risk for there is what we want you to do for your facility. Next. And then next slide. And then, some of the new things that have come up, those are the natural, some man-made disasters that can happen. But, COVID, we've all been through COVID and we saw what that brought. We are concerned about the flu season coming up. Last year, everybody was still social distancing, wearing masks and things like that. We don't see that as much now, even though COVID is still out there and raging. flu season could be the one that we were worried about last year, this season. So recommend you getting your flu shot, being prepared for that. Know your risk. Red tide, for those on the Barrier Islands, know exactly what I'm talking about, having a plan for that, and then what we're seeing too out there everywhere are labor shortages. So, knowing your risk for that, and that goes hand in hand with the supply chain, right? What happens with your guests arriving as airline travel is interrupted, or, your laundry soap is interrupted, things like that could affect your business. Having an understanding and alternate ability to overcome that is important when you have a continuity of operations plan. Okay. And that's what we ask. It's funny that Katrina mentioned early on, that she manages all sorts of guests and all that. And we do that here at Emergency Management. We manage from it's not going to happen here till we're all going to die. So, but the truth is really it's somewhere in the middle there. And that middle is met by a plan. If you have a good plan and you exercise your plan, you could overcome any of these disasters or concerns that could befall you and your guests and your facility, right? So COVID, knowing the importance of planning well in advance, having a hurricane kit, your continuity of operations kit too, not just for your personal self, but for your business, your important papers and things like that, taking that with you if you have to evacuate. Evacuation isn't just for you, it's going to be for your guests. It's going to be for your employees and yourself. And you really need to involve your employees in your planning and in their considerations as well, too. If you do that, they're going to continue to support you and then support your guests in turn. How are you going to manage evacuations for yourself and your guests? Hotels, motels out of the area or out of the storm surge. You can go tens of miles, not hundreds of miles. So, internal hotels that may be available or out of the storm surge evacuation zones or out of the area as well too. And listen carefully to the evacuation order. All evacuations have a beginning and end time, and that's very important, especially for businesses, right? We want everybody to be at their safe place by the end time of the evacuation order, because we feel that we're looking at the information from the National Weather Service, and we feel that that's the time that the things will deteriorate quickly right after that. And you want to be at your safe point. But we also want our businesses to, your Circle K's and the gas stations to stay open as long as possible during that time, but leave at enough time where their family and their employees could get back to a safe place as well, too. So it's a little balance act for businesses. We want you to be at your safe place by the end of the evacuation time, but we also want you to, stay in business for as long as possible. But it's, again, considering yourself and your employees in that time frame. We know that a lot of folks have electrical dependent durable devices, having a plan for that. If there is an extended power outage, please don't forget your pets. Take your pets with you if you're going to evacuate. Have a plan for them. The same with your vehicle and the boats. Chief mentioned Tropical Storm Eta and that event as well too. We found that many people left the safety of the inside of their homes because they saw their cars flooding out there, and then they stepped out into deeper water, right? So you need to have a plan for, storm surge and for your vehicle, your boat, your pets, and yourself. And public shelters, they're available. If you need public shelters, we make them available for you, but that's not a way to treat a guest, right? So you really need to have a plan of where you can get them to a sister hotel or some other facility, or, get them out and on their way ahead of time. So guests would, rent a car, things like that. They're able to have a little more ability to get out. Ones that are dependent on an airline, things like that, they have to leave early. So, being considerate of your guests if they need to leave for an evacuation, and, leave time for your employees, as I mentioned earlier, to prepare their families for the storm as well, and you as well as the business owner. Next. Just another example of, things that we do commonly, that I always say that hurricane planning for us is the gold standard for all our other hazards that we plan for, because it encompasses all our partners and things like that. But a tornado issue is something very similar. So if you're in a hotel that doesn't have to evacuate, a tornado warning works for a hurricane as well too, high wind event. They need to get to the interior of the hotel room, get back or inside of the hotel itself, and they can brace and cover up and ride out the storm there as well too, right? Many bathrooms are away from the front windows and things like that in a hotel room that people can hunker down. So that same thing that you would do for maybe a tornado actually works in a hurricane event as well too. So it's just an example of common planning that you have today can be extended to other hazards as well too. Next. And then, so this chief was talking about, before the storm, what they're doing, the fire service, things that you could consider some best practices is, establish your disaster team working with your employees, a liaison to the guests, keeping track of your guests, your facility preparations, and involving your employees in these plans, and then guest expectations, that you're going to be preparing the property, closing common areas, that you may need to board up windows and bringing in the lawn furniture and decor that's around your establishment. You certainly don't want your folks, hunkering down in unsafe areas like a clubhouse or common area in your hotel, if that's not safe to do. So, looking out to where your guests may be during a storm, right? Bring in the outdoor furniture, things like that, or drop it in the pool is what some folks have been doing as a best practice. But let your guests know your intent of how you're going to prepare your property and whether you're going to shut down electricity, water service, and things like that to protect your building. The Duke and that, the misnomer is that they shut off the power. They do not shut off the power. They let it run until it's a point of failure for that, because they don't know who's on medical durable goods. They don't want people to lose all their groceries and things like that in refrigerators and things. So they leave it on because they've hoping that they've hardened the system enough that it can withstand that. Next. Just carrying on about providing the guests your hurricane plan, their evacuation options, have a communications plan with your guests, make sure you have their expectations met and yours for what's happening as well too. Next. Then after the storm, we need folks to stay in place, right? We need 4 to 12 hours to clean up the roads, depending on how impactful the event was. So it's not safe to drive right away because we're getting out there with our road clearing teams and clearing the debris, the down power lines and things like that. So we ask that you just stay in place, no driving until, at least 4 to 8 hours minimum for most storms where we get out there and the teams are ready. They're standing by as soon as it's safe to do so. So, depending on the daylight hours, they're getting out there. And recovery takes time. So prepare for 7 days on your own, food, water, things like that. Resources are coming, but it takes time to get those mustered up and into the county, especially if our bridges are out and things like that. And, for your own assistance, the chief mentioned the hang tag program, having enough of those available, and then and having the right contracts in place for your contractors to come in and help you out as well too. So having more than one contractor so that if they're busy somewhere else, you have another one to go to. So having these no cost contracts in place so for as needed is really good. Price gouging is not allowed during declared disaster. So that is for you and for the your suppliers as well too. Shouldn't be gouging you for things that you need. And debris cleanup. If many of the cities and the counties all have debris contractors, and there's a particular way to put your debris out there. So white appliances, your shrubbery debris, foliage in one area, and then construction debris in another area. And if you lay it out like that, they're going to come around once the crews get going, and they're going to pick all that up. That takes time. But they're going to be out there cleaning up the debris. And then, for all businesses, you need a continuity of operations plan, right? You want to be self-reliant. Self-reliance helps you be self-sufficient and helps you build resiliency. So, think about the things that you need that can carry you through those 7 days and help you get back on your feet as well, too. Engage your employees. And then for every day, you should calculate the loss of opportunity, right? So if your pool is out and that's your main draw to your establishment, that's a lost opportunity if people are going to go elsewhere because the pool is not working or the AC is not working in there. So look at the things that are essential to your business and make sure that you have a plan to mitigate those losses, blue sky and gray sky, because that lost opportunity equates to loss income as well too. And then, and everybody touched on the insurance. What we saw with Tropical Storm Eta is you need to be insured for what your expectation is for recovery, right? So I have down below that, understanding the 50% rule. So if you're damaged greater than 50%, does your insurance cover rebuilding, elevating your structure and building back stronger to today's standards? Or are you just insured for the way your place is right now? And that might be not enough, and you might be underinsured. And then there's the loss of use as well too. And there's some of that affects residential units as well too. If your place is being repaired and you need a place to live, if you're living at your establishment and now you got to rent that another place, the loss of use, you could have extra expenses in that as well too. So that's something to look at as well too. Then again, don't leave your pets behind and only use local trusted sources of information. And I'll touch on that next. But you should have a to-go kit. Part of the COOP plan, again, is having all your papers and everything in a nice file cabinet you could pick up and go. Okay, and that works for you at home, and it works for businesses as well too. So have that in mind. To stay informed, and we ask you to only use trusted source information. So as Dave mentioned earlier, Alert Pinellas, Ready Pinellas. You can sign up for Alert Pinellas at your business, at your home, up to 5 sites per individual there. So you can get, if we have to do geo-targeted notifications, you can get those as well too. But we do use that to send all call messages. We have the landline numbers in Alert Pinellas, so we can make calls there. Local media, not CNN, Fox, and those. Your local stations, are actually coming here to the EOC, working with us, working with Dave with the PIO network, and getting the local message. Our timing for when storm surge is coming is going to be different than when citrus is, and it could even be different than what Tampa experiences. So local media, what is the Pinellas message? I tell everybody to have a NOAA weather radio, battery operated, because if all else fails, we're going to be on 970 and broadcasting, and 620, and getting our message out, okay, through their broadcast networks there. Our Pinellas County website is available. And then as Dave mentioned too, in absence of all that, if people can't get out, we're going to do the WIA message. We can hit all the cell phones with that, and as well as the EAS messaging, where we can do the TV scroll as well too. So before the storm, as the storm's impacting, we can talk about those high winds and the evacuation order as well too. Next, how can you get involved? One, getting involved is having your plan and going through these things, but FEMA post-impact does have what's called a transitioning shelter assistance program. And this is where survivors can go and once they register with FEMA and get approved, they can get availability into hotels that have signed up for this program. So if you signed up for this, you get the room rate for that as well too. It's not they're not going to try and get you the lowest rate possible. They're going to get you at the typical rate that you would get, and you'll be able to sign up, and then survivors are going to be able to get into your hotel rooms. And typically it lasts no more than 30 days, but it can't exceed 60. So we saw with Maria, they did extend it a few times for those survivors that came over from Puerto Rico and elsewhere. But it's a great program. It actually helps out the citizens greatly, and when people are not traveling, and it keeps them here locally too. So typically these are going to be our Pinellas residents who may have lost their home that need a place to stay, or a helping hand up. Next, also helping your neighbors. You can wherever you are in your community there, help your neighbors. Help them repair as well too. Look out for them. You could adopt a shelter if you like. If your hotel wants to come and work at a shelter, that'd be great. If you're an interior hotel and you have a safe room, a larger conference room or something, you could be a shelter as well too to take some folks in. And we have the host home program too on our website that you can get involved in. And you could be a community comfort center post-disaster as well too, where folks can come and maybe use some electrical power to charge up their devices and things, or get into some AC for a while, or maybe use your outside shower, hopefully clothed, to rinse off and get cleaned up a bit. And then we have a program going on that's pledged to plan. And you can use those QR codes as well too. I'm sure they're going to share this presentation out. Next. And then it's funny, I did this presentation last September 8th, and we were only up to Larry. And since then, we're all the way down to Sam now. So just in that amount of time, September, we're still in the heat of hurricane season. So don't let your guard down. I know it's been quiet out there. We have some fish storms kicking out there, and we pray that they continue to be fish storms. But yep, we're up to Sam, and we wanted Teresa, Victor, and Wanda to go before. This year, we're using secondary names rather than the Greek alphabet. It was causing confusion, and you can't retire Greek alphabet letters, and then you have nothing. So they've moved to the World Organization has moved to the names on standby, as you see over there. But hopefully we don't get to any of those. But yep, just ask you to keep your vigilance up, keep your planning up. It's never too late to keep planning. And the other thing too is if you can mitigate some of those hazards that we were talking about earlier, doing your analysis, you actually save $6 in recovery. So every dollar spent in mitigation for any type of disaster, flooding, wind, and things like that, you'll save $6 in the recovery end of that. That's been proven over and over. It's better to harden and be prepared than it is to recover. Recovery takes time and it costs a lot more money. So that's just something to consider. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Again, we know it's a lot of information. We will be sending out a full resource guide with links to all of this useful information that everyone has gone through today, as well as a link to the video to this webinar. I just want to quickly jump to Brian Ellis. Brian, what should business owners do, or where can they start their preparations for the 2021 hurricane season?
Sure, absolutely. So I strongly recommend business owners, especially the small lodging owners, to watch the Project Phoenix video, Project Phoenix 2.0, just to see what it could be like and hear some stories about some businesses that dealt with disaster. I really recommend looking at the tool called floridadisaster.biz, and what that can allow you to do. It's a state resource. You can create or update a business continuity plan. So if you've never thought about it or put anything in place, you can kind of start there. Put in inputs about your particular establishment, and it'll be interactive and kind of tailor a business continuity plan for you. I suggest review and understand your insurance coverages. So depending on what you have, make sure you really understand what it is and what you actually don't have as well. I would encourage businesses and residents, for that matter. Pinellas County has a flood simulator tool where you can input your address of your home or business, and you can see the level of flooding depending on certain situations. If I'm not mistaken, that's at floodmaps.pinellascounty.org. Lisa can verify that. So if you watch the video, that's a free resource that was funded by the EDA. We created it, but that's public. That's for everybody. That can be found on youtube.com. It can be found on tbrpc.org. So it's out there, and we want that to get into people's hands. As far as resources go, your county's emergency website or emergency management website is going to be the absolute best information you can get, depending on what county you live in. So Pinellas County has their own. So that's best information. There's just one resource I want to bring up quickly. It's called the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. This is a program that was brought to us by the American Rescue Plan Act in response to COVID-19 recovery. But this is a free broadband service for people that qualify, such as Social Security income or a child on reduced lunch, or had a significant loss of income due to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. So if you qualify under an umbrella of reasons, you can access free broadband up to $50 a month for a credit. Please take advantage of that if that applies to you. I just encourage you to become familiar with your Pinellas County Emergency Management websites and any resources. And also, I believe Connor mentioned the Pinellas County Hurricane Disaster Guide that's available in print. It's very comprehensive, and it can be found in libraries and things like that. Specifically, if you need to find the location, you can reach out to your emergency management website.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. As we get the video pulled up, we're going to show the Project Phoenix simulation as we kind of head out of here. We know that you've stayed over the time, so we really do appreciate that. We have a survey that was created for this webinar. We would really like your feedback. It will be taken into consideration for future planning for small lodgings events and looking forward to things like workshops where we can do hopefully in-person events again soon, and have you come in to where we can sit down and really work through this and help you walk out with at least the beginning of a plan. So we really would like your feedback in terms of participation for those types of things and what other education components you're looking for. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you to all of the wonderful panelists who brought all of your knowledge and expertise to this program. And we will end with Project Phoenix. And if you have any questions, you can email myself, Jay McCracken, JMCCRACKEN @pinellascounty.org, and I can pass those along to our panelists, but it doesn't look like we have any in the Q&A. So hopefully that means we've addressed all of your concerns. If not, you can always reach out to emergency management or myself personally, and we will get those questions answered for you. Thank you so much for joining us. And here is Project Phoenix.
And we have Category 1 Hurricane Phoenix just south of Jamaica now. Phoenix is currently expected to make landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula as a Category 2 storm. But of course, always, we are keeping a close eye on this system.
There has been a noticeable shift in the forecast track from the NHC overnight, which now brings Phoenix into our viewing area, possibly as a strong hurricane. Now is the time to begin those preparations, folks.
We have breaking news this morning if you're just joining us. The National Hurricane Center has upgraded our entire viewing area to a hurricane warning as Hurricane Phoenix is projected to make landfall as a major hurricane sometime tomorrow. Mandatory evacuations are in effect for all coastal regions. Forecasters say this storm could be one of the strongest ever to hit the Tampa Bay region.
We cannot stress enough how crucial it is that you finish your storm preparations tonight. Conditions will deteriorate rapidly tomorrow morning, and evacuation routes will quickly become impassable. Please don't take this lightly and heed all evacuation orders.
Folks, this is unfortunately the worst case scenario unfolding for the Tampa Bay area. Phoenix is now a Category 5 hurricane with maximum sustained winds at 160 miles an hour, but wind gusts up to 200 miles per hour. This is catastrophic. It is a historic storm and unfortunately making a beeline right now for our area.
We have a live look right now at North Tampa and Polk Street. I believe this is near Kawa Coffee, and as you can see, the storm surge has completely inundated downtown.
Law enforcement now is reporting that all bridges have been cut off by storm surge. We're looking at up to 20 feet of storm surge in some spots.
We're trapped on the third floor of the Tampa General Hospital parking garage, and the storm surge is up to the second floor of the hospital.
St. Petersburg is essentially an island right now.
A viewer from Brooksville is reporting roofs being torn off of businesses there, so this is a very important reminder that this is not just a coastal storm. We are seeing significant wind damage well inland.
Unbelievable gusts coming through. Oh my goodness.
The damage this morning is unimaginable. The beaches are essentially gone.
The Howard Franklin Bridge is completely destroyed. I've never seen anything like this.
Officials are scrambling to clean up debris from local airports in order for supplies to be flown in. We are getting reports from Homosassa of residents trapped by downed trees.
There's not a single business that we've driven by that doesn't have significant damage.
Tampa General Hospital has told us that they are unable to receive any patients after the hospital suffered significant damage from wind and storm surge. The level of destruction out here is indescribable. It's going to be a very long road to recovery for the Tampa Bay area.